This, we should start. Thank you all once again for coming. My name is Janat. I'm one of the co-organizers of TPM Summit. If you didn't grab a t-shirt and tote from the last event we had, please help yourself get a couple. We have a few leftovers, but we'll start distributing them among different events. One, and then the very first announcement that I want to start from is what is TPM Trails and how this all come together. So TPM Trails is our next chapter with all the TPM community building that started off, as you all know, with the TPM Summit that we had last October, which I think was a blast. We had 300 people live, we had 250 stream on the stream. And a lot of you approached us with an ask to have a local meetups where we can come together, discuss hot topics, discuss open questions, clarify things for ourselves, and reduce this ambiguity that there is there in the industry about the role, right? So TPM Trails is our effort to get these local chapters off the ground. And we're starting today with the introduction of the Bay Area chapter. And we are working on chapters in other cities, namely Seattle is putting up an event pretty soon. We have a team in Europe that we're gonna start from Munich. Also, Dublin is being in the works. We have folks on the ground in New York, Boston, some interest from Canada and India. There is a team in India that putting together the first event there. So you'll hear a lot from TPM Trails all around the world with the same goal, like bring everybody together and share the best practices, share the knowledge, and elevate the role with each other together. So with that, I think I want to introduce you to the leads of the Bay Area chapter and also have a call for action if you want to be part of this. We really need help with spaces. We really need help with speakers. We really need help with different things, not only in Bay Area, but also in other chapters as well. If you're part of the Slack community, there is a TPM Trails Slack channel. If you're not part of it, let me know. I'll send you the invite links, so you'll be there. So with that, I want to introduce you to Oskan and Snehal. Let me hand this off to you. You can just hold it if you need to, or you can put it on because you're gonna do the, and then that says for you. So take it away.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone, thank you for coming in this weather. And yeah, I mean, I was doing TPM role, I think it's been more than 10 years. But I honestly didn't know what I was doing as a TPM, so as a definition. So I really wanted to reach out like-minded people like you, and how I can improve myself, and how I can improve the community, and all together. As you know, the market situation right now, and some companies announced that they will phase out this TPM role, which I see and understand. Yeah, I mean, I really sad, honestly. And hopefully we will revive and make this role more known better, and how our role is useful for each companies and teams. And that's why I want to join and revive this Bay Area Trails and chapter, and with help Snehal and Zanat and
Josie,
and of course Josh in Seattle. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and hope we can enjoy together and learn together.
Yeah, I think what often said. It's good to see all of you who made it in this weather. I mean, it was really challenging. Thank you for coming here. I see some familiar faces from the TPM Summit. It's great to see you. And again, we're here to just build the community, share, learn from each other. So I'm looking forward to connect with each one of you again. And this is the first event, so again, we're learning some of these technical things and others. So great that you're part of this first event, and we're going to have the next event. This is going to be on the monthly cadence. So
that's the intent.
Yeah. So we have the next one lined up. That's going to be at GitHub on Feb 28th, and more details will be shared shortly. But
Shout out to Prasandeep from GitHub, who is helping us to get the space and the speakers. So we'll talk about AI and TPM role.
cool.
I also would like to mention to our, provider, sponsor for this place, Magnamind and
Yes.
owner Uğur. Thank you for his generosity, really. We got the place in a very short time. And now we have, thank you for Magnamind. That's
Yes.
Mindrum.
This is one of the events which we thought about it and kind of making it happen
Yes.
in less than 2 weeks, I
That's
would
great.
say. Yeah, pretty quick. So thank you again, everybody, for making it happen, and thank you for coming. I'm gonna hand it over to Josie, and let's get started.
There's a specific reason why I'm here, but, excuse me. Just gonna echo the excitement. Kind of special being the very first TPM Trails. Janet, Josh and I started, TPM events with the idea of community. And so this is just carrying on from that. I want to have a big thanks to Snehal, Ozkan and Janet for really being the people who arranged this one. And so, what I'm doing that community and as part of that, I am going to talk about TPM Summit. So, who went to the TPM Summit in October? Good. I love this. This is what we want. Continuity. So I'm here to announce the date for TPM Summit 2024. So we are thrilled to announce that on Friday, October the 4th, at the same location, Community Museum, we are having the second TPM Summit. And it's going to be better. And we've got, when we did it last year, we also, no one knew us. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we've learned a lot from that last one too. Like, first of all, we're going to have a breakout room. Second breakout room is going to be much bigger. We're going to have time to get from one to another. We're going to have more time for networking. We're going to make sure our check-in processes is better. So stay tuned for that. Please make sure you follow us on TPM Trails and TPM Event. Is that
Yes.
LinkedIn? We'll be announcing, and the other thing too is we will be looking for people to help us with that. There's a lot of work that goes into this. We'll be doing a call for papers again, and stay tuned. We are hoping that timeline will probably come out sort of early spring. So very excited about that, and we want to keep this moving going. So thank you so much for coming tonight, and I'm going to hand it over to Ozkan, who's going to introduce our speaker.
Right, again, right. So I'd like to introduce, Brandon here. You don't have everything yet. Okay, I will sit down. And bring my questions.
Introduction of someone.
Yes.
Implemented in person. About TPM.
So, I'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Brent. Maybe I'll start off my career in terms of becoming a TPM and working as a TPM. So I would say that we kind of started maybe around about the year 2004 in the UK, Scotland. Started working for a company, ST Microelectronics, where our number one customer was Nokia. So we started making cameras for Nokia. Initially, the company wanted to sell semiconductor, image sensors to Nokia. Nokia said, hey, I'm not going to do image sensors. I need cameras. So I was recruited as operations manager. So I was operations manager in ST Microelectronics for about 7 years. My job there was get the drawings, get the specifications, go off, make the products, subcon suppliers. And I would say that was going pretty good. I really enjoyed it. Then out of the blue, I got an email from Apple. Exact same job with California. I'm now a TPM. I came and do the same job. There's no difference. Actually, the same suppliers, same companies I'm working with. Only difference was I wasn't picking drawings. Engineers were giving the drawings and the engineering spec. But my job was to go into the suppliers, make sure that the suppliers are shipping the parts, delivering the parts, and making sure that the project is on track. All the quality issues was being followed. Which brings me on to my next key point. One day I kind of raised, hey, who's the quality guy? Well, that's you as well. So I went to TPM plus SQE. So my job title became TPM and SQE manager. And then over a period of time, I recruited TPMs, and I also recruited SQE. So I became the TPM SQE manager. So I would say the key role within Apple was, again, getting the drawings, getting the specs, going to the suppliers, working with them, making sure that they deliver all the components on time as per spec. So I did that for just over 8 years. Started iPhone 5, iPhone 6, iPhone 7, iPhone 8, iPhone 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I thought that's it.
And typically, camera component for each iPhone, right?
No, I was doing all the cameras for all the products. Actually, one of my first products in Apple was the very last of the iPods, which we actually put quick focus camera to the iPod. And my first camera to start working on within Apple was the iPhone 5. My first project from start to finish was iPhone 6. And of course, there was always the 6S and 8S and 10S. And whatever. So yeah, so it became, I would say, a little bit very samey every year. Really repetitive. So I stayed in Apple for 8 years. And then I actually started working on the Vision Pro, which I believe is going to come out. I started working on that around about 2018, actually, quite a long time back. Yeah, which I mean, now
Come back to these projects again.
yeah, we'll come back. But I started working on that. That was quite interesting technology. So then I decided, hey, you know, mobile phones, okay, I've been at it for quite a while. So I moved to Meta. That's where I am at the moment. Now I moved to Meta as a TPM. Worked as a TPM for just over 2 years. Then I got pinged a couple of times by the quality manager, or that we call quality team. I'm actually executing that. So I'm not actually a TPM. I'm quality manager for all the cameras.
So yeah, we get a question. So what makes you excited about this role, like dealing with hardwares, the manufacturers, or being TPM, hardware TPM?
So being a hardware TPM for me, and you know, I think it's normal. You're a mix of everything. You're working with the people, you're working with the product, you're working on as a program manager. So it's a mix of all of these different skills. But it's also working across, I would say, the full XFN team. You're working with reliability, you're working with GSMs. So you're working across the whole spectrum within the company. So at PPM, you give visibility into all the different areas. So that's what I find most interesting.
Maybe actually now we can speak about the products you're working on and you're proud of. So maybe if they are not under NDA.
Most of the old projects, yeah, most of the, especially I think previous company that I worked with, all the projects that were done released. I would say that all the iPhones, I was pretty proud of all the iPhones. Maybe in particular with the few key ones, iPhone 6 was quite an unusual one. It was one of the first OIS. That was quite interesting, even though there was a lot of issues with that project, it was still a very interesting project. iPhone 10 was also interesting as well.
You mentioned Vision Pro, so.
And Vision Pro as well. Vision Pro was interesting to work on in that it was completely different. And Vision Pro as well has a lot of cameras. So when I talk about cameras, I'm talking about photographic imaging, depth sensing type cameras, machine perception. So these headsets, they have a lot of different technology in them, like tracking your hands, doing the rooms. So when I talk about cameras, I'm talking about the full spectrum of all the cameras.
And did you work on similar products on that? Like,
yeah, so we're working on similar projects today.
and are you expected to know all these hardware components or just need to bring visibility to the teams?
So I would say it depends on the TPM, and it depends even within the different teams. Sometimes I see that the TPM is very detailed, very technical. Other things, and even different companies, I can see that this TPM is more on the scheduling side, which would not maybe go as deep. So it seems to be very much company dependent and very much team dependent.
Okay. So you mentioned you worked for Apple and now Meta. Can you mention a little bit about the difference in the companies?
Meta is very much, I think, the bottoms up. I would say that TPM and the ICs have a lot of influence within Meta. A lot of decision making is made at IC level, and of course, we put it into leadership. Whereas, the difference which is coming after is, a lot of clarifications are made to leadership, and then leadership will have to make the decision. I like it, I like it. I feel like the big difference because then I was also like from top to bottom. Top to bottom, they don't talk much, they don't talk that.
So yeah, I think not everyone here, how they TPM, and maybe you'd like to mention about the differences between doing separate TPM and hardware TPM.
So somebody else asked me, I've only been a software people for, I would say, a short period of time. Within, predominantly working in the camera domain. And as a software, on the software side, I was taking all the issues that was within the camera, and I was stacking them over to the software team. And when I got a phone call from the software manager with a fantastic job, why don't you come up to us? I'm like, hey, I don't know much about software, and he says, okay, don't worry about it, you can fix all the issues, yeah. But for me, when I did work on the software side, the big difference is in terms of hardware, we have very clear milestones that we have to meet, like DVT, DVT, and we have certain criteria that we have to meet, certain gates that we have to meet at each step. And we will have a checklist and we'll go through, yes, we did this, we did this, we did this, we did this. Okay, we finished that phase of the project, we can now move on to the next phase. So we will have a date, but we'll also have a gates that we need to complete. And we'll go through and, we start reviewing them in about maybe 2 to 3 weeks before that specific date, make sure we've closed off everything.
On the hardware side.
On the hardware side. On the software side, from my experience, when I work on the software, we come to that specific date, we say, okay, we're now moving to the next phase. Hey, but we checked everything. Well, today's the 5th of June, right? No, we said go to move to the next phase. So for me, at least, it wasn't so much driven that we had to close off all the issues. Of course, they've done all the work and all the work completed, but not the same detail on it. Everything is quality checked before you move on. That's my.
And these are 3 timelines, right? I mean, if you fail to reach out the timeline, then the project fails, or
No, you'd potentially have to catch up if you can't meet that specific timeline. And of course, yes, it's seldom that it will be pushed out very. You might be looking at pushing out maybe a couple of weeks.
And so what do you see, by the way, the technology trends for this year?
Well, I can talk about maybe in terms of the camera. Of course, everything is moving. Of course, machine perception and all of this like is getting more where instead of having a mouse, everything you see your hands, you can do a lot. Like Tom Cruise kind of like a lot. You can actually control systems. That's on the hardware side of that, but of course the big what's coming out more and more is AI, and things seems to be linked with the AI that's linked in with the hardware at the moment. So the AI is having a big impact even on the hardware decisions.
And finally, say the convergence finally happening, like in between the virtual world and real world.
I think so, yes. Yeah, definitely.
Right. And finally, so what advice would you like to give aspiring hardware TPMs or those who would like to pivot to this area?
Aspiring hardware TPMs, I would say maybe the key advice would be finding a product that you enjoy. I think number one is being a TPM. You need to enjoy what you're working on. To me, TPM is quite unusual in that it's not a 9-to-5 job. It might be lunchtime on midnight. It depends what product you're working on, depends what component. You need to enjoy the work, you need to enjoy the product, and you need to have pride in that particular product that you're working on. Of course. Yeah, find a product that you enjoy.
Okay, so maybe some questions. Jonathan?
Yeah.
Let me.
So, you mentioned there are milestones that you have to follow.
Mm.
You do your best to have the checklist, make sure things don't go wrong. what happens when things go wrong? What are the best practices?
So I think as a TPM, and one of the key, as a good TPM is you will actually see the risks, you will be highlighting the risks in advance. So you shouldn't get to a certain point and say, oh, fail, fail, fail. You need to understand well in advance that, hey, this is a potential risk. You need to start highlighting that risk. You need to highlight that risk if it's an engineering issue. You need to highlight it to the engineer, hey, I see this risk. Let them go off and work on that. And I would say a period of time before the drop dead date, you should actually have, review everything like that. You shouldn't really get into the problem where, hey, we have to be confident. Now, sometimes you are surprised. Sometimes something can out at the very last minute. In that case, you have a couple of options. Number one is you can understand what is the risk level. You can say, okay, we will proceed to the next phase, but we need to close the risk before we get to a certain point. Unless you might say, hey, let's just move that until we actually fix the issue. Sometimes people jump on saying we're not fixing this issue.
There's like a strict, you can't go to the next gate until you put those up.
You can go to the next. Again, it depends on the risk level and depends on the issue.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any question?
Thank you. This was so useful. One question, recently I was part of device management deployments in most of the business application point of view, right? When I look at it, software development lifecycle versus hardware development life cycles, they're so different. Like I can take risks with software.
Yes.
It can go wrong, I can go fix it. But with hardware, it was so hard. I learned my lessons from that. But I'm just asking you, like, how do you overlap with the hardware lifecycle? You have embedded software in it, the device software, and then your application software. How do you overlap? How do you manage risks in that, particularly when you have high visibility, high cost device as a core product that's going out to consumers?
So yeah, so definitely hardware, you will have very key, you have key milestones. Rather than say by the end of EBT, you need to have locked down all the design, locked down all the process. This is a standard. And you're quite right, it doesn't seem to be quite the same with software because you can maybe make some tweaks to the software afterwards, whereas you cannot do that majority of the case with the hardware. Yes, there's too many changes that might be another 2 months or 3 months. I would say maybe just come back a bit as a TPM. Sometimes you actually even have to educate the wider team, like the engineering team. They'll say, oh, I've got 2 designs. I want to go with these 2 designs to the next phase. And you have to tell them, no, as per EBT, you need to select one. And it's like, oh, it's really hard. And this is the next one. You do your matrix and what is the best option moving forward.
Yeah.
So that's in terms of the hardware. The hardware, you have to lock it down. And
You have multiple designs and based on the risk factor, and you create multiple hardware prototypes.
Normally, yes. Normally, you start off at the beginning, you have multiple different designs as you go through the project, and you would narrow it down. Ideally to 2 designs, and then by the end of EBT, you would narrow it down and just select one design.
Why only 2? Like, why only 2?
So I think if you have more than one, if you have the more designs you have, the more we would actually call it configs, the more different configs you have. Right. So if you have a design, and if you had, for argument's sake, 5 different components within this design, 5 key components, and if you have 2 of them that might be variables, you have a lot of different configs. So you need everything to work together as a system. So that's why you would say, okay, you've got 2 designs, you lower down the number of configs, you go through all the reliability testing, and then go to the next stage, and you say, okay, we just select what we do was the best design going forward. Don't go to the next, but I think to come back to your question, the question that is in relation to software. Software from my side is mainly related to, I would say, image performance. The experience that I have, image performance within the camera itself. The key I would say one of the keys, again, to come back to the hardware. After a certain point, it's very difficult for us to change the hardware. Even though the software team may come back and say, we would like you to make some changes. We're saying, hey, we can't make those changes.
Right.
It's gonna take us 2 months. It's gonna take us 3 months to make those changes.
Right.
You just have to do the best that you can with the software. And to be honest, the software team has helped us out with a lot of problems. A lot of times, yeah.
How much is the differentiation from a risk point of view with the device software versus application software? Like, have you noticed the device software, which is more embedded into the device? How much of iteration does it go versus the application software? Like, what is your understanding of it with experience?
So for me is, again, coming back, the experience that I've had in terms of, we call it game software, it's an ongoing process. All road to very, very high. It's always seems to be tuning, fine tuning, fine tweaking this to get the best, performance.
From a life cycle, do you think device software is less iterations after it's in production? Like the application software can go through like in a year, like 5 updates versus.
Normally once we would hit MP, we would not like
Okay.
too much
You think
after that. Sometimes we do, and again, we have had instances where something mechanically has gone wrong with the system, and we would actually have to get a software fix to fix that issue.
I have a comment here. So I heard that Apple is actually implemented or working on, updating the firmware in the app stores. So even, right in the last minute, they were able to actually upgrade or update the firmware and software in the phones or in the devices.
Yeah.
You can confirm that?
In the software within.
Yeah, I mean, so I heard that they implement specific, updating mechanisms. I think on the fly maybe, but like if some specific Wi-Fi network, they were able to upgrade firmware and software in the phones or in the devices.
But you upgrade the software quite a lot in your phone, right?
I do, yeah.
So that's.
But the thing is, no, I mean, the device is in the box, the phone is in the box, it's not open, and it's in the retail box, right? So to update, you have to do some operation, like turn it on. So this is what I'm saying.
Okay, to be honest, it's not something that, I would say maybe, I probably know as much as you do about this, yes, at this particular time. But yeah, definitely, it's a lot of the software can be updated if there's an issue with a certain component, the software team will know can fix this.
So just one thing, once you mentioned, remember the CDs and DVDs? This is I think it's we are now so used to do everything online. But before we used to buy CDs and DVDs, and when something goes wrong, we have to wait for patching, right? Yeah, it was unique.
What advice you give to a software TPM who want to go to a hardware TPM job?
So the advice is, again, there's a few key requirements, I think, within the hardware. Number one is understanding gates of the different phases that the hardware goes through. Understanding what is the requirement for these. I'm not a great believer that you have to be very deep within the technology, but if you can actually manage the program, if you can manage the people, if you can actually add value to the XFN team, add value to the engineers, and you go back to the engineers and you highlight, again, as we said, you highlight what all the milestones they need to reach, where they should be at a certain point. Don't wait until you get to the very last minute and start doing it, checking off, make sure everything's okay. You should be doing this as an ongoing process. But in terms of hardware, I would say, yeah, adding value to the project, adding value to the XFN team, bringing all the XFN team together, highlighting all the status. This is the status of the project today. These are the issues of the project. This is what we need to work on. And going through a list of all the issues.
So quick question. So I know we spoke, I would say a little bit, right? So you've worked at Apple and Meta. From a hardware standpoint, 2 questions actually. I don't know if you can answer the first one. how many respins do you think? Which company were? How many respins have you done at Apple compared to Meta? Which one was more?
How much?
Respins of an hardware if something goes wrong.
Respins.
Respins. So let's say we can't. We have to go change the hardware a little bit because there is some major issue.
Oh, okay. So I think that's a good question. And we did start tracking this.
Have you seen more at Apple compared to Meta? Have you seen more at Apple compared to Meta on the hardware side?
I would say it's similar.
Similar.
I would say it's similar in terms of respins. It's a good question. Maybe I've seen more maybe in Apple.
In Apple?
When I think about it, yes, in terms of respins.
Okay.
And
my second question is, how much of strategy has played a role in your TPM career so far? Doesn't matter whether it's Apple or Meta. So, or maybe which one do you think you have to be more strategic as a TPM?
I would say both of them. I feel that when I started working in Apple, maybe in 2012, there was more scope there to be strategic in that you were looking at, you were planning quite far ahead. In terms of where it was when I left, everything was pretty much stabilized. So at 2012, when I went in, there wasn't a lot there in terms of procedures, in terms of what suppliers we had to use, which maybe sounds a little bit strange because we're on iPhone 6 at that stage. So it was actually laying out all of that. What is the plan going forward? Where do we want to get to in another 2 years? Where do we want to get in 5 years? Of course, that's also there in Meta. But it was more at a nice sea level, I would say, within Apple back then.
My question is related to adding value and showing as a TPM and showing that value to the organizations that we support. I was just gonna pick up your experiences in that space. I'm sure companies are different, Apple versus Meta. So we TPM are sometimes in the back scene. We help scale organizations. We help solve problems to others and influence without a territory to others to land. And when it's very successful, obviously engineering and other organizations take a great success at that. And when things fail, people look at the TPM. So I wonder what worked for you best to, especially when things are success, to sell that, what the TPM value added, and how do you sell that to your organizations or your stakeholders so that they can see that what the value is in terms of having a TPM in that space?
I would say and it's something I think maybe we can all, include myself, we can all do better is in terms of reporting, just escalating what you're working on, given a clear summary. This is what I'm working on. This is the status. Again, I keep coming back. For me, the key for a TPM is highlighting what's the risks, what's the issues, what we need to work on, and working through these and showing progress step by step, week by week. Hey, we're working on these issues. We're getting through our list. Our list is still getting longer, but we're getting through all the issues. And by the time you come to a certain gate, whereas these issues started off as being a very high risk issues, then they got lower risk. And by the time you get to a certain gate, then they're actually at a very low risk. And then you can go in there, you can actually even have a review with your leadership. They have the visibility, oh, you've been working on this. I've seen you've been working on this for so many weeks or so many months. Well done, you've got to this point. Congratulations, move on to the next stage in the project. And then of course the final is when you get to MP. You launch the project on time. And everything is quite a success, and everything is aligned. No major issues.
I wanted to take some questions from Zoom. We do have folks joining virtually. So the first question is coming from Lalitha. I'll read the question and then provide some context. So the question is the following. how do you do vendor and manufacturing management in terms of delays in delivery between the teams and the vendor and getting a stable firmware image to manufacturing before production?
How do you manage?
How do you do vendor and manufacturing management?
Okay, so I think for me, one of the key, and it's one of the what I introduced in the previous company, one of the key is when you start off with a new supplier, is you need to go in and audit that supplier. You need to, as a TPM, you go in with XFN team, you bring in engineering, you bring in process, you bring in quality, you do a deep evaluation on that supplier. You find out all the issues with that supplier. You decide if you want to, if there's high risk with that supplier, you don't go with that supplier, but you look for another supplier, you look for another vendor, yeah. So you need to understand the risks with that supplier. And again, is then when you're working through the project, there will be unexpected issues. But as long as you start off on the right footing and you have the right suppliers, you should not have a whole list of issues ongoing. For me, the key is starting off with the right suppliers, auditing the suppliers, making sure the supplier is capable. Does that answer? That answers your first part, I think.
I think so, yes.
And then the next part was
in terms of delays in delivery between the teams and the vendors and getting a stable firmware image to manufacturing before production. This is getting into the tactical things. How do you hand off the software between team that you work with, vendor, and if there is some manufacturing in production, like manufacturing going in?
and the delays between.
How do you manage that? Yeah, how do you manage all these interdependencies?
So again, is it a case of just tracking all the issues, tracking all the different variables that you actually have, tracking? We would actually have quite similar in terms of, yeah, we would actually have a lot of different suppliers and we'd have different variables within different suppliers, but as the TPM is tracking the status of each of these and linking everything up together, that okay, if you do not do X, this company cannot do the next step, that you're going to have another added delay. Sometimes you have to go back to the second company and says, hey, got bad news. Company before you, they were going to have a 2 to 3 week delay. Then sometimes this company can find a workaround and say, okay, we were planning to update some new software, but we'll actually use an old hardware device that we can still boot up. We can still use that hardware device. And then once the new system comes along, then we'll definitely test on the new system.
They don't lose the cycles.
So you do not, even though if one delays, you do not want to delay the second point.
This is actually a good segue to the next question from Valerie on Zoom as well. Was there an agile style framework for hardware used that you worked at the companies? Because agile and Scrum was developed for software.
Yeah.
And hardware has components that don't fit in regular sprints of setup.
Yeah, well, most companies that I'm familiar with, they've all used agile, yes. Even hardware, yes, we use agile to varying degrees, right?
Have stand-ups.
Stand-ups?
Daily stand-ups.
No. What's a daily stand-up? I'm not familiar with that one.
But then the question asking for sprints, is it also bi-weekly sprints or the sprints for hardware are longer? Is it like monthly where you?
Sorry, we're talking about agile?
Agile methodology.
So my experience of agile, the document comes out about 2 months after you've finished the project, in my experience. Okay, so agile is not within the hardware domain. We do use agile, but we use agile normally for recording. It's kept as a record.
I see.
Does that answer?
I think so. I think it kind of piecemeals the understanding together. But what I'm hearing is more that developing hardware process is more longer term, where you have all the milestones and phases. So it's less of iterative saying, okay, this didn't work for 2 weeks, let's scrap it and then try something else, which can be in the fast-paced software development. Very structured. Okay, so these are the questions we had so far from the audience on streaming. Any other? Yes.
I'm
please.
right by the mic, so I'm taking over.
We'll get to you.
Thank you. Hi, Brandon. My name is Igaram. I am managing software development projects, and I'm really hoping I can get access to the recording later so that I can learn more, because I'm working on building the PMO. And I have 2 questions. So if we are short on time, we can I can ask one. So one of them is I wanted to understand about estimating work. So I feel like that's like a big challenge, at least in my space. How would you estimate work? Like what goes into it to ensure that you have the right resources lined up and you know the right timelines, and so that you don't run out of, I guess, like the budget or resources. Like what, if you have any tips? And I'm just going to go ahead and ask my second question. So my second question is, when we structure work, we're always competing for resources, right? There are always like limited resources, limited developers and engineers. How do you make sure that your projects get staffed first? How do you make sure your projects get the attention and the support that you need? Are there any tips? Because I really could use them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So good questions. Thank you. So I think the first is a very key question, especially in timelines, because a lot of in terms of the hardware, we may be waiting for like 3 months, 4 months for some tooling. You know, we'll kick off a design, we'll do the design, it'll go through different reviews, and then we'll give it to a company who start making the tooling. Might take 2 to 3 months, and of course that hundreds of thousands of dollars. You need to, at the very, very beginning, you need to start scoping out who the suppliers are that's going to be working on this, who's the companies that's going to be working on this, and getting their feedback as to what they believe. And you try and get it week by week, and then you would actually have to put it onto all the review process, and then based on that, you'd have to build up a very high-level plan. This is going to take 4 months. This is going to take a month and a half. This is going to take this. That's going to be for this phase of the project. You need to pull it through very, very fast, scope out all the project. And then I would say, based on that, you're somewhat committed, that you need to meet that. You would put on a certain amount of margin just to allow some buffers. And sometimes you'd even push back. Somebody will come and say, oh, I can do that in 10 weeks. You would actually have to really scope out, can you really do it in 10 weeks? And then you go through all the detail, finer detail. And then you come up with it, says, then they say, okay, maybe not 10 weeks. I need actually 12 weeks, or I need 14 weeks. So then you say, okay, I'll give you 14 weeks, but you can't go a day over. But then actually you start, even when you get to 12 weeks, when you're working on it, you start pushing that, make sure we're on schedule. Then the second is, in terms of getting the personnel that you need, you would actually, at different phases on the project, you will need different personnel. Also, I feel as well is that you shouldn't be asking for personnel that you don't really need, that you're not going to utilize on the project at that certain period of time. I think that's one of the key points. Sometimes I would actually make some kind of an agreement. I say, okay, I need X personnel, but I only need him a small percentage of the time. Can I actually ping that guy when I need him and pull him into the project? Resource kind of sharing, it's kind of resource sharing. And then they say, yeah, we can do that. That's pretty good. But then if you really need a resource, and of course, I think we always need resources, we always kind of seem to be short, you need to start highlighting what's the impact of not having that resource, potential risks. And you need to highlight that to a senior level. If I don't have this resource, this is the risk, and start escalating that. And again, it's working with the leadership, you can actually decide, hey, is this a risk we're willing to take? Maybe yes. Okay, so we don't get the resource, we take the risk. It's as simple as that, yeah.
Hey, do you have any advice for a TPM who is wanting to transition from a service-based company to a product company?
So I think it comes back to, again, it's a previous question. Again, if you want to transition to a product company, you would need to, I think this one is understanding all the phases of the project, what is required to manage that project. Also, as well as the other key is when you were to go for an interview for that particular position, you should have a basic understanding on that product. And you'd be amazed about the number of people that turn up for interviews. Maybe they've even gone two or even 3 interviews, and you ask them, tell me about the product. I don't know anything about the product, but you must have Googled it.
Right.
Nope. Okay, thank you. So you would need to, you need to understand you'd need to understand how to manage a project. That's one of the key, and I think that's is a transferable skill. You need to understand the phases of that particular projects that they go through, and start looking into the technology itself. What's the key components within that technology?
Hi, thanks for sharing your amazing professional journey. When you look back, what was your most challenging project and what did you learn from that particular
Well, I
project?
think all of them. And I think that's one of the, maybe one of the nice things about working on the cameras. Every one of them has always been incrementally more difficult. So, so I think that's where it's been quite interesting. If you go back, like, first one we did was a 2P lens. We thought, wow, crazy difficult. Then we went to 3P, we'll never make this. And now there's 7P, 8P. Yeah, so it goes incrementally every year, it gets more and more difficult. Okay.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Just had a quick question going back to what you said, first part of your journey where you have to like deal with multiple stakeholders within your organization. You're dealing with SQs, GSM, DREs, and you're obviously involved in each of these issues. At what point would I say, for a better word, where does your jurisdiction end? Where do you feel like you can add the most value without overstepping the boundary of their responsibility?
So I think, you don't want to overstep the boundary. There is a boundary. You need to be able to highlight what that person needs to know. And again, this, for argument's sake, when we go back, engineering, they're saying, oh, I've got 2 designs, I'll actually down select it in the next. You say you cannot, you have to down select that at this particular point. You have to down select it at this point. A lot of the times they don't actually know this. So they're actually thankful for this kind of feedback, for this information that you're given as a TPM. You're giving them this feedback. Also, as well as giving them the feedback is by this particular date, you should be at a certain stage. By this particular date, we need to do X review. And I think the engineering team, they actually appreciate that. A lot of the engineering team actually appreciate that you're giving them this kind of guidance, that where they're kind of looking at all the technical issues and that they're kind of bogged down with this. But if you're guiding them and says, hey, you've got another week that you need to do this, and you've got this period of time that you need to do this. I find that a lot of the engineers are actually quite thankful for this kind of feedback. And then you were talking about X-Event team. Maybe again, just highlighting issues to maybe REL team that you will see, that you will get together with the REL team. You start looking at these issues together. And again, it's working with all the different highlighting the issues that you foresee and working with these guys to actually try and come up with a solution to these.
Okay, one final question, and this question is building upon other questions that were here and probably will be a good conclusion for the hardware lifecycle. The question is on prototypes. How do you get to the point where you can set what the design is for the hardware, given that there are experiments to test ideas, and how do you then make a decision about what you finally go with and you invest the money into the product?
Can you repeat the first part again?
Right, so prototypes. How do you get to the point where you can definitively set what the design is for the hardware? and the assumption is that there is some experimentation, some testing, and when and how do you draw final decision? Like this is the design we moving forward.
So I think you should have a good scope though on what the end requirements are for that particular hardware. You should have a good understanding of what the end requirements are going to be. But what you would do, what I would normally do is we look at the different designs that we would actually have. We might have maybe 2, we might have 3, we might have 4. You come up with a matrix and on these different designs, and you basically score them and you say, okay, this is what we're going to go with. And that's what we've done in many instances in the past where you'd actually put a score in against each of these. Now, if you're saying that one of the requirements is like a very high requirement, then you would actually put a weighting against that. That will actually pull what design you're going to go with.
Got it.
So again, for me, for a TPM is very much data driven. It's not that you're like, let's go with this one. I like this guy. I like his design.
I like the color of this new phone.
I like the color. So it has to be very much data driven. And you have to have reasoning behind that. So yeah, you come up with a matrix, you put a weighting onto all the different requirements. Maybe time is the key requirement. You don't know whatever you say that the key requirement. Maybe it's functionality, maybe it's something else.
Right. So honestly, I learned so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. And I realized that actually, like, there are really big overlaps in between software and TPM, hardware and TPMs. So it's again, I mean, based on data, hard milestones. I mean, maybe we can be more soft on the software side, and bringing out the risks, right? Being like a more zoom out level visibility, and escalation in the right time. So yeah, I learned so much, and thank you for sharing your experience with us. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.